Greetings, everyone. On Saturday, August 14, 2021, the people of Haiti experienced an earthquake at 7.2 magnitude at approximately 7:29 in the morning. Let it be recorded that the children of Fedon, the children of Bussa, the children of Marcus Garvey, the children of Anna Kauna, the children of Boukman, the children of all the freedom fighters and the lovers of peace and prosperity and development around the Caribbean and around the world express their solidarity and their prayers for the people of Haiti, our sisters and brothers, for minimal disruption to life and property and for speedy recovery. My name is Amina Blackwood Meeks, and in this forum, we have representatives of our sisters and brothers from Haiti. Before we proceed, I'd like to ask Dr. Cécile Accilien if you would please call upon the universe to be in agreement with us about the recovery of Haiti from this immediate natural disaster impact.
Thank you, Amina. Boukman's prayer. The God who created the earth, who created the sun that gives us light. The God who holds up the ocean, who makes the thunder roll. Our God who has ears to hear. You who are hidden in the clouds, who watch us from where you are. You see all that the white has made us suffer. The white man's God asks him to commit crimes, but the God within us wants to do good. Our God, who is so good, so just, he orders us to revenge our wrongs. It's he who will direct our arms and bring us the victory. It's he who will assist us. We all should throw away the image of the white man's God who is so pitiless. Listen to the voice for liberty that speaks in all our hearts. In the name of Boukman.
Thank you very much. Again, greetings, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us in this very, very important conversation, which we are having in the spirit of our ancestors, in the spirit of our culture. We know we can talk to the ancestors, and we know that we can cross time and space because we carry within us all of that information and all of what that information needs. Today, we want to look at the outcomes and the present impact of an event which happened 230 years ago, which, because I like to know which days things happen on, I discovered that August 14, 1791 was in fact on a Sunday. We're going to look at the significance of that in a little while. I want to introduce you to the people who are partaking in this discussion with us. Our panelists, we just heard from Dr. Cécile Accilien, and we are now want to introduce Dr. Jean-Eddy Saint-Paul, who is a professor of sociology, a former founding director of the Haitian Studies Institute at Brooklyn College of the City University of New York, and an author of 45 books and many other laudable things that you will find when you Google his name and look at his accomplishments. In order for us to meet him more fulsomely and to understand the place called Haiti that we're going to be talking about, I want to ask you, Jean-Eddy, if you would talk about the fact that your first degree was from a Haitian university, not an offshore university, but a university in Haiti itself. a place that we do not normally associate because we have not been taught to associate Haiti with the highest levels of education. If you would tell us what that walk at that tertiary institution was like, where you studied and also worked for a period of time, and to place yourself in the context of the importance of education, the highest level of education to the people of Haiti.
Thank you so much, Amina. Thank you so much, my colleague Cécile. It's my great pleasure to share this platform with you. Let me just first thank Mr. Steve Russell for having invited me and for having designed this great panel discussion. It is a delight to share this virtual platform with you, Amina. And I would like to also thanks to everyone who are connected virtually with us. And today it marks, as you said, the 230th commemoration of the anniversary of the revolt of enslaved African born as captive in America. I am one of the sons of those captives. I am a descendant of those captives. So I was born in Haiti and grew up in Haiti. Attend college, my first degree, undergrad studies, I complete all in Haiti. So I am a product of the public education of Haiti, and also I am a product of the State University of Haiti. I complete my bachelor degree in social work from the State University of Haiti. So, and that allowed me after that to go and complete graduate studies abroad of Haiti. So in Haiti, we used to have an educational system. Although the system is very elitist, we have to recognize that is an elitist system. So it's like very few people from my background have the opportunity to graduate from the State University of Haiti to attend college. So I can say that I am among those few people based on my origin, because when I was born in Haiti, my birth certificate reads, you know, I was like a paysan or peasant. So that means someone who was born in the countryside. So in my own country, my birth certificate classify me as a second-class citizen. And when you were born in Haiti, in the urban city, you were a citizen. So this is me. But because the spirit of the ancestor never let me down, because of my ancestor, I am still alive and I'm doing what I'm doing. So it's a great pleasure for me to be on this platform to share, you know, those ideas, because today is very important for the politics of memory. And the present is like a connection between the past. So it's very important as sociologists, we cannot forgive, we cannot afford to forgive the past. And that past is still much present in the present. So thank you.
We're going to come back to explore that some more. I want, though, to ask you to explain how it is that someone could look at your birth certificate and say, this is a second-class citizen, or this is a citizen. What do the actual words on the birth certificate say?
It says paysan. Paysan is like peasant, yeah, paysan. Paysan, that means you are outside the Republic of Port-au-Prince. Because Haiti, since after the assassination, and it was not in the name of Boukman, because in the name of Boukman, as we will see throughout that conversation, the name of Boukman symbolizes first and foremost freedom for all. The name of Boukman symbolizes liberty for all. The name of Boukman symbolizes, you know, we are not dignified life. But after the assassination of the founder of Haiti, Jean-Jacques Dessalines, on October 17, 1806, So many things were concentrated in the Republic of Port-au-Prince. So the Republic of Port-au-Prince is the Republic for the first citizen, and what we call the pays en dehors, the countryside, is known as second-class citizen. And I was born in the countryside of Haiti.
Got that. So we're getting an insight into why it is and how it is that we could be talking about elitist education. We're going to come back to that. Now I want us to meet our second panelist. Dr. Cécile Accilien is herself a successful author of some very fascinating titles, at least fascinating for me, one of which is Revolutionary Freedoms, A History of Survival, Strength, and Imagination in Haiti, and also Just Below South, Intercultural Performance in the Caribbean and the US South. Dr. Cécile, by way of us getting to know you, I am provoked by your involvement with the performing arts, performance culture in the Caribbean. And I would like you to walk us through how you became involved in that. What is the connection between our culture and the politics of memory? And really, are we being serious when we say there is a connection between our struggles for freedom and how we utilize our heritage, our culture, our art forms?
Thank you, merci en pile in Haitian Creole. I want to thank the organizers and you, Amina, the tech people, everyone directly and indirectly who has made this happen. So I say merci en pile and thank you very much to each and every one of you. And thank you for this question. I come from the background of teaching language. And so I was fortunate enough when I was in graduate school in Tulane University in New Orleans, I was teaching Haitian Creole, which to me that was so incredible, a language when I was growing up, I was not allowed to speak because of so many of what Jean-Eddy said. I was not allowed to speak Haitian Creole at school. I will get punished. In the late 70s and early 80s. And so when I was teaching, I was also teaching French. And through a friend, I met artist Ulrich Jean-Pierre, whose work is in revolutionary freedom. And I remember meeting, seeing his work. It's as if I was reading like Haiti's history book that I grew up with, that we used to have to recite. So I was so moved. And in fact, in my background, I have the image of Cécile Fatiman, who is the Mambo, Voodoo priestess, who took place, who participated to orchestrated the ceremony of Bois-Caïman. And so I was so moved, that marked me, because, and this was in the late 90s, early 2000, because I saw the importance of visual culture in changing Haiti's narratives, because we are dealing with a place because of so many of the reasons Jean-Eddy mentioned, the colorism, the 2% who control Haiti, colonialism. Many people in Haiti do not have access to education. And so to me, visually, to be able to see oneself is so powerful. And so many of my work have focused on popular culture, because I believe we are in a world that's very visual. It's important for people to be able to create their own narratives and see themselves be represented, not by Hollywood, not by this Eurocentric culture, but by Haitian artists, Haitian American artists. So this is part of my trajectory, of my desire to change Haiti's narrative. So I'm very committed to the work of artists, and what they are doing and representing Haiti.
And yet there is a contradiction in that, I think, Dr. Cécile, that the very visual culture of Haiti constitutes part of the mechanism through which Haiti is exploited. We see people going to Haiti and they're bargaining for the absolutely lowest price of the wonderful artwork created by Haitian artists. And then the artwork itself becomes a talking point on their walls, in their living rooms, I think, rather than being used to explore the history and the contemporary conditions of Haiti and how art might be used in changing that narrative. I'd like you to speak to that contradiction.
Yes, definitely. And thank you for bringing that. And in fact, we could have a whole other conversation just about the exploitation of artists and how suddenly some European and American, the Eurocentric mindset of this is what we consider art, and suddenly it's acceptable, and there's a whole polemic with the artiste grand rue and how art, who makes the money, and that is very true. But many of the artists, when I think of Colette Brasilia, or I think of Ulrich Jean-Pierre, or I think of Vladimir Sibyl Charlier, what moves me, or Zik Matias and others out of Miami, Florida, is the fact that they are representing Haitian history through their art. Like they are challenging the negative representation that you have. Haiti, as all of us here know, like Haiti, then you have supposedly poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. And this is because people do not know history. And I think these artists work in trying to present a different history of Haiti, because they also, what many of these same people do not know, they do not know how the US profited and the US became, rich on Haiti's back. And they don't know about the US occupation of Haiti. And some of these images represent that. For instance, one of the Marines who killed Charlemagne Péral during the American occupation of Haiti, when he was giving the Medal of Honor, supposedly for extraordinary heroism, that killed Charlemagne Péral because he was fighting against the Americans. Later on, there is one American soldier who said that he spent a big part of his time as a high-class muscle for big business. And there's this famous quote, and it says something along the line, it's Smedley Butler, like anybody who knows about this period know about this man. And he talks about the fact that he was a racketeer and a gangster for capitalism, and how he helped make Haiti and Cuba a decent place for the National City Bank to collect revenues. And he talked about, and I was very moved by this quote, he talked about the fact that he helped in the raping of half a dozen Central American republics for the benefit of Wall Street. So when we connect the art, if we know the work of Charlemagne Péral, if we see how different Haitian artists represent somebody like Charlemagne Péral, and then we go and understand his role in the American occupation, and then we see Smedley Butler, we can understand how Haiti, as one colleague recently said, Marlene Do, the question should not be why is Haiti so poor, but why is the US so rich? When you connect Haiti's poverty, quote unquote, with US's, with the National Bank, with how they went and raped, quote unquote, Haiti.
Thank you for that. Thank you for making all of those connections. And thank you for, in making those connections, helping us to see how everything is everything. Because I believe we could argue that all of that manifested in the latest crisis, there must be another word, but English is so limited. In the latest crisis, which has once again propelled Haiti to international attention or focus, and that is in the assassination of your president, Jovenel Moïse. I want to ask if both of you, starting with you, Dr. Jean Eddy, could answer for me a simple question. Why should we care?
We should care for many things. And one of the first one is like the international war against Haiti that has started, you know, let's say by 1804, if we want to put some date, that international war, that global war, you know, leads by the master of the racialized capitalist system, that global war on Black people, that global war on the oppressed of the global South, that the global war on brown people, you know, that global war is still, that started in Haiti, that global war is still going on in Haiti. And the assassination of the former Haitian president, Jovenel Moïse, is also connected somehow to that global imperialistic war against Haiti. And what's happened just today also, that new earthquake we will talk about maybe, that earthquake that, you know, struck the south of Haiti where I was born, is also connected to that imperialistic logic against Haiti. So, and to give you some example about the assassination of Jovenel Moïse, as I said recently in an interview that I shared in the chat with you, that I conceded to PBS, Jovenel Moïse came into power, you know, bribed by the Haitian oligarchy. He was someone who was mostly unknown for the Haitian electorate. Jovenel Moïse was not Jean-Bertrand Aristide. He was not like a charismatic figure that the Haitian electorate knew about him before the election. Jovenel Moïse was introduced to the Haitian electorate by Michel Joseph Martelly, a former musician who was imposed as president to Haitian people with the help of the State Department at the hand of Hillary Rodham Clinton. So the US, you know, they intervened in Haitian politics and they imposed Michel Joseph Martelly. And Michel Joseph Martelly also introduced Jovenel Moïse to the Haitian population. And Jovenel Moïse, when he campaigned, that he said that he will put money in the pocket of Haitian people and he will put food on their table, right? But Jovenel Moïse, he made a pact with the oligarchy. But doing this government, he started trying to hold accountable only two oligarchic families in Haiti. And more, you know, possibly this is one of the cause of his assassination, because he wanted from, you know, a family, oligarchic family of more than 20 families, he just wanted to hold accountable 2 of them. But Jovenel Moïse was a product of the same oligarchy. And the same oligarchy is ruling Haiti, as Cécile said, and I said in my publication and interview. We have in Haiti a country of more than 99% of Black skin. Boukman, when he said that prayer, the God of the white is an evil, you know, is a mauvais bon Dieu, is a bad God. Why the God of the African, the enslaved or the captive, was portrayed as a good God, you bon Dieu. In Haitian Creole, we say bon Dieu, bon Dieu is a good God, right? So Boukman didn't, fight for the enslavement of Black people. He fought for the liberation, emancipation of Black people. But in Haiti, Black people, as I said in an interview that I conducted to on Global TV in Brazil, Black people, we are like foreigners on our land because we don't run the economy. And anyone who took any intro class in social science or sociology recall the lesson of Karl Marx. The economy is the basis of the foundation of everything, but we don't control the economy. And that oligarchy is mostly connected and supported by the US, by Canada, by the core group, and by the international community. So that global war that started, that global war in which Cécile Fatima, in which Boukman, in which Biassou and Macandal and many others were involved in Boakaima. So that global war, we are Haitian people, we are still struggling in that global war. Just today, an earthquake hit Haiti. But what's happened if after the earthquake of 11 years ago, in 2010, many billions were collected in the name of the reconstruction of Haiti to build Haiti back and better. But 11 years after, that money was misused.
Six houses. And we will come back to that.
Okay, got you.
I want to get your perspective, Dr. Cécile, that this latest crisis is but another manifestation of the betrayal of the original objectives of freedom and peace and prosperity for all in Haiti.
Yeah, I mean, as Jean-Eddy started saying, when you don't have people who care about Haiti, when you don't have a political elite in Haiti, you have business, and I like his term, he's a sociologist of oligarchy. You have these people who are just trying to ruin the country. They all have some other passport, whether it's a German passport, a US passport, a Canadian passport, France, German, name your pick. So if you don't have a political class who wants Haiti to get better, you just have businessmen who just out to make money, you can never move forward. And for me, as a cultural and literary scholar, I'm always amazed by which stories we do not hear. Whether this earthquake that just happened this morning or the earthquake that happened over 11 years ago, we never hear about how Haitians are coming together to help one another. They always give us the idea that we're waiting for the blanc, we're waiting for the white man. And it's like the US, Canada, France, you name them, put together with the Haitian elite, have literally, it's like they're squeezing the average person in Haiti. Like you're squeezing a lemon. And until we deal with that, all the other questions, we cannot really answer them. And we must return to history. All of us on the panels, we are students of history. We have to return to the US embargo from the time Haiti gained its independence in 1804 until 1862, because the US did not recognize Haiti's independence because it was scared of what that meant for its own interests as a slaveholder. And also, we must not forget the very fact that people of color took arms and said, we want to be free, even if we die. this was before, as quoting Jean-Eddy, before hashtag, this was the first ideology of Black Lives Matter. This is what Boukman was saying. In 1791, Boukman was saying Black Lives Matter. You know, he just did not use those words. So in order to understand that, to understand all that has been used, you have to understand the embargo. You have to understand how France focus on getting the US to continuously keep Haiti from moving forward. You have to understand things like what it's called in Creole or in French, l'affaire Ludès, the Ludès affair. And I believe it was 1897, which was such an embarrassing moment in Haitian history, where basically, and I won't get into detail, but there was issue with a German businessman, and I believe he was then arrested. Not only the Haitian government, it escalated to the fact that they had to issue a letter of apology to the German government, a 21-gun salute to the flag, and all this. And the US was behind that. How insulting. Could you imagine somebody going to the US and said, because of what happened on January 6th with supporters of Donald Trump, and then let's say somebody from Haiti or anywhere else had died, that they're demanding, or somebody going to prison. We have to understand these. We have to understand, as I mentioned earlier, the occupation from 1915 to 1934, the damage that the US did. We have to understand what happened with Aristide. And we can have a separate conversation about Aristide as a person, and I'm one of those as a leader who do not think suddenly, and I get very annoyed when suddenly people are acting like Jovenel Moïse was the modern Toussaint Louverture. But we have to separate these. You know, does the country have sovereignty? What does it mean? Why is the US constantly meddling? What's in it for them?
Allow me, we need to take a break.
Sorry.
Break. I want to encourage everybody in the room to post your comments in the chat. If there is a contribution that you want to make, if you have a song, a poem, and you want to see your face and hear your voice and want us to meet you in that way, please indicate so in the chat. At this moment, I would like to recognize and thank the organizers and the sponsors of this event in this very important week in the history of Haiti and the history of the region. First of all, I want to recognize CariCon, and I want to recognize the convener of CariCon, Mr. Steve Russell, and I believe that there may be visual acknowledgements of the other sponsors that we would like to post at this time.
Me gusta. Me gusta.
Cuando amanece, cuánto me gustas.
Tus playas, tu mar, tu cielo, me gustan.
Tu sonrisa al verme, cuando me abrazan tus olas y despiertan tus aromas.
Me gusta.
Tus paseos,
Me gusta.
descubrirte,
Me gusta.
tus secretos, todo en ti me gusta.
Dominicana, me gusta como eres, me gusta tu belleza, todo lo que tienes. Dominicana, me gusta como eres y toda su belleza, que abre los brazos, te quiere.
Dominican Republic has it all.
My name is Amina Blackwood Meeks. We're watching the chat. Please don't be shy. It's a learning opportunity. And as Dr. Cécile indicated earlier, learning is a two-way street. And so we are going to be learning from the questions as well. Thank you, Lisa. Applause for Steve Russell, Dorothy McLeod, and the CariCon team. All your questions, all your feedback, any other interventions you might want to make. Thank you, Aziko. Thanks for this initiative. So much we haven't been told. And I want to go directly back to one of those now, the occupation. It is easy to understand, I think, that because the US was still a slave society, still had enslaved Africans, and it wanted to protect those interests so that slavery could continue, it is easy to understand how it would have been in collaboration with the French to turn back 1804. And we talk about that a great deal. And perhaps there is more of that information that we can access than we are able to access the occupation, which began in 1915, if my learning is correct, and lasted for up to 34 years. So Jean Eddy, walk us through what caused that occupation. And I know that Cécile spoke about it's an embarrassing moment in Haitian history. And part of what I want to ask is, who should be ashamed? Very often we take on being ashamed of other people's criminalities and historical injustices. So walk us through that 1915, what caused it, and what are some of the exacerbations within the context of the global war?
Okay, thank you for a very great question. And as you know, I'm a sociologist, and in sociology, for us, context is very important. And I think we couldn't go straight in 1915 if, as Cécile said, without some, educational tools. For instance, our viewer, they should know that without Haiti, the US wouldn't become first a continental power, because it was after the Battle of Vertières that happened on November 18, 1803, that Bonaparte would decide to sell to the US what they call the French Louisiana. And with the acquisition of the French Louisiana, the US, under the presidency of Thomas Jefferson, will double its territory. So, and the guy who really did that deal for the US was James Monroe. And Monroe would become president, I think the fourth or fifth president of the US. And in 1823, Monroe launched the Monroe Doctrine, America for Americans. So as you can see, in the end of the 19th century, the US will start to implement, abruptly the Monroe Doctrine. The US will intervene in, for instance, in Cuba. They will have, the Platt Amendment. They will intervene in the Dominican Republic, in Panama, in Colombia. And also they was about to intervene in Haiti. So in 1889, the US sent someone to Haiti to negotiate the lease of the Mole Saint Nicolas for the construction of a military bases, military base for the US. And at that time, a guy whose name was Joseph Antenor-Firmin, great intellectual, the guy who wrote the book on the equality of human race, to challenge, the idea that Black people were inferior to white. He said, no, we won't sell the Mole Saint Nicolas, but the US really need that place for in Haiti because of the geopolitical location of Haiti. So the US, they intervened in Haiti in 1914, but it was something that was cooking many years before, right? There are certain theses that also associated the assassination of the Haitian president Guillaume Sam to some external power who wanted to destabilize Haiti in order to make possible that occupation. And about the occupation, it's very important to know that it was a Democrat president, because now there is a certain kind of rhetoric in politics to make us think that Republican members of the GOP, they are the evil, and the good guys are those in the Democratic Party. This is a big lie, because when it comes to Haiti, both Democrat and Republican, they have adopted the same policy. So it was a Democrat president, Woodrow Wilson, who ordered the occupation of Haiti. The US at that time, they said we were living in a Jim Crow society. We are still living in a Jim Crow society, but it was more high Jim Crow society. So most of the soldiers, the Marines, they sent to Haiti were Southerners. They were born in, grew up and bred in the South. So they were racist people. So they arrived in Haiti. They pick only light-skinned mulattoes to make puppet president. They changed the Haitian Constitution because since 1805, the first constitution of Jean-Jacques Dessalines, any foreigner couldn't own land in Haiti. They changed that clause in the Constitution, so now they could start earning land in Haiti. So, and also, many people didn't know that, but the US, they went straight to the National Bank of Haiti, and they took the money, the reserve gold in the National Bank of Haiti. That money was transferred to the National City Bank of New York. Now it's just Citibank. And the money of Haiti helped in the reconstruction of the US after the Great Depression of 1929. The money of Haiti also helped to enhance and foster Wall Street. So at the same time now, many Black people are, having that conversation on Oklahoma, the Black Wall Street that was destroyed because of racialized capitalism. We should also have a conversation about, the money of Haiti that helped to rebuild the US after the Great Depression of 1929. The money from Haitian people who helped to boost Wall Street. So the US also, we should have a conversation about economic reparation for Haiti. So this is some of the things that that occupation did. But not only that, Haitian society is a society based on colorisms, right? But the US, because of the occupation, we will observe as a consequence an exacerbation of the problem of skin color. Because from the president Sigdad in the occupation, the first president of the occupation, and after the occupation, you will have Stenio Vincent, mulatto light skin. You will have, Elie Lescaut. No Black people became president of Haiti. So the occupation reinforced the ideology of color, the ideology of caste in the Haitian society. And lastly, Haitian people had their own army. The US put their own army in Haiti, and that army would be very much involved in destabilization, in generating political chaos in Haiti. For instance, in 1946, we had a kind of social reform in Haiti, a social movement that was called the Noirisme. But one of the presidents, Dumas-Estimé, managed to stabilize Haiti from 1946 to 1950. But guess what? General Magloire, Paul-Eugène Magloire, who was trained by the US Army, he overthrew, the progressist president Dumas-Estimé. And since that also, that changed completely the political trajectory of Haiti. All those things are the direct consequences of the first US occupation of Haiti between 1915 and 1934 for 19 years.
Yes, I want to bring, thank you very much. I want to bring Dr. Cécile back into this discussion because a very important subtext or sub-theme, which we need 2 or 3 other programs to be able to discuss and understand properly, is the very important point that even when the Democrats are in power in the United States, it does not alter US foreign policy. And US foreign policy is never in the interest of people like ourselves. If US foreign policy were in our interest, then President Obama would have made a different impact. And we would have been speaking about him differently in terms of the historical outcome of his 2 terms of being the first Black president of the United States of America, and also of the party to which he belonged. Dr. Cécile.
Yes, yes, and this is where we have to radically think about how do we want to shape our history. One of the big problems in Haiti is that we do not have solidarity. And the few times we have solidarity, and by solidarity, let me be clear, I'm talking about those who have power, they do not see themselves as being Haitian in the sense of caring about one's country, wanting the country to progress. They're just businessmen who wants to profit. They don't care about the country, the people of the country, how the country is represented. Because as soon as they step in the airport in Haiti, they have their German, French, Belgian, US, Canadian, or what have you passport. And this is what they do because they do not invest in the country. For instance, even if somebody who comes, who's not part of the bourgeois, which I'm not, Jean-Eddy is not, many of us are not, even if we couldn't have access to like a decent hospital, but because these businessmen, they have the means, they negotiate in millions of US dollars per month. Why couldn't they create a decent hospital for themselves? Anytime something happened, they fly to the Dominican Republic, Cuba, Miami. So even that, so that's what people do not understand. They are not Haitian. So it's very simplistic and it will be intellectually unethical on my part to just say, let's just blame the outsiders. We have to blame these people within Haiti. And as Jean-Eddy said, there's the problem of colorism, but there's also the problem of who has power. It's those who has money. You know, we know the saying, always follow the money. So, and we have a whole history, again, whether it's the Democrats, it's the Republican, you can say the lesser of the 2 evil, or there's a French saying that say between pest and cholera, it's like choose your evil, so to speak. But until you really have a president who really see Haiti, because even though you have the president, most of them will look dark skinned, it is that 1% behind the scene, those businessmen, those business class, they are the one, there's only about like those 10 families or so who's really controlling Haiti. They will not allow, whether it's people from the diaspora who economically support Haiti, they will not allow them to really have business that will help shape and change the country. And don't even get me started on the politics of aid. And I don't know if anybody has seen Federal Assistant by Raoul Peck, a must see, you know, because Federal Assistant really show how aid is really to help the US in these other countries. And so people always want to present Haiti or, oh, you know, it's because look how much money has been sent in Haiti. How are you going to take the US rice? It costs cheaper than the Haitian rice. What are you doing to those farmers when you introduce these neoliberalist practices? This is imperialism. One may wonder what would have happened if Haiti had been left alone. If you say, okay, we've tried all these things, we've tried imperialism, we've tried neocolonialism, we've tried occupation, and we're not calling it occupation, but Haiti has been occupied since I don't know when. We're constantly under different types of occupation. Let's try something else. Let's really let Haitians bring a different Haitian solution.
Before we
that
go
look
into
like?
the solution and before we take the next break, I would like us to look at the specifics if we have them now, or direct us to where to find the specifics, but to look at the change in the Haitian Constitution occasioned by President Truman. I think, correct me if I'm not correct on that, because one of the things that some of us took pride in is that 1804 Constitution that began by declaring to the universe who we were and why we were free and what that freedom meant and how we should have a stake in our place Haiti, and how we should protect it. And yet, after 1914 to 1934, we hear almost by the way that the Constitution was changed, and it was not changed from within. I'd like us to look at the implications of that, of what was changed, before we take the next break, please. Jean-Eddy, you want to come in on that?
Yeah, thank you so much. I have to recognize, because I'm trying to be very objective. Personally, I did my PhD dissertation on the political culture of Haitian elites. So I analyzed in my PhD dissertation the Constitution of 1805, the Constitution of May 20th, 1805. And first, in the name of Boukman, the day of the Haitian Constitution, the Haitian flag, shouldn't be May 18, should be May 30th, because it's the date in which that Constitution say this is our flag. So the Constitution of 1805 is very important when it comes to rethink Haiti from a neo-colonial perspective. Because that Constitution, that Constitution said in the Article 14, we all will be recognized under the generic denomination of Black. So the Constitution of 1805 in that Article 14 is inscribed into the part of the Constitution of 1801 of Toussaint Louverture. And the Article 3 and 4 and 5 of the Constitution of Toussaint Louverture say, no one, we were born free, we should live free and die free with dignity. So the Constitution of 1805 is very important when it comes to the dignified life of Haitian people. That Constitution also recognizes, anticipate, because I'm a scholar on religion, also I teach sociology of religion. Before that, in the West, concepts such as laicity or secularization would be popularized. The Constitution of 1805, the Constitution of Toussaint Jean-Jacques Dessalines say, establish the principle, a clear distinction, separation between politics and religion, between church and state. That Constitution anticipates the modern notion of the secular state in the Western Hemisphere. That Constitution also said everyone should have, a profession. You should work. The Constitution anticipates many things, even though I recognize that Jean-Jacques Dessalines had too much power concentrated in his hands. So I'm not saying Dessalines was the perfect example, but that constitution say we own the land, and that constitution emphasized on what is the Haitian nationality. It was a constitution that expressed proud in being Haitian. It say if you, for instance, you took the nationality of another country, it like you were like a threat, you know. You are not like, it's because it was very important to be Haitian. And Jean-Jacques Dessalines, because someone asked why we are talking about the Boukman and not enough about Jean-Jacques Dessalines, it's because the project of Jean-Jacques Dessalines was the continuation of the philosophy of Dutty Boukman. So Jean-Jacques Dessalines, he said that you are Black, and Black, you know, Black is beautiful. You know, Black is power. So Black power, Black is beautiful. And I said in my recent interview, you know, Black Lives Matter. All those things are codified in the Constitution of Jean-Jacques Dessalines. So, and prevent also the vassalization, prevent also that Constitution, prevent also the vassalization and the undermining of the Haitian sovereignty. But the US, because it's very important, the US, they want, because they want to portray themselves, to advertise themselves as the beacon of democracy. And in democracy, it's very important. There are two important concepts in political sociology: the concept of legality and legitimacy. The US want also always to portray, oh, what I'm doing is legal, so I have a legal, the law allow that. So because they want everything to be inscribed in the card of the law, but something that is legal is not necessarily moral. Something that is legal is not necessarily ethical. So they change the Constitution in order to give a facade of legality to their political domination, a facade of legality in order to legitimize their imperialistic domination over Haiti, over Haitian, over Haitian resources, over the country. So this is that framework, sociological framework is very important to understand why they changed the Constitution, because they didn't want to start buying land to do things, and after you will say, oh, you did that and you are saying you are the promoter of democracy or make the world safe for democracy. No, they said, no, this is, we did something that was legal. We weren't against the law. This is the mentality of white supremacy. This is a mentality of Jim Crow. You have some law, you follow the law, but to do one thing, and that is against the spirit of Boukman. And this is according to the will of the God of the white folk, the God that is evil.
Let us take a moment to absorb all of that. It is critical that we understand why the Constitution was changed and how certain criminalities could become respectable. While we absorb that, could we just once more thank the sponsors of this conversation?
Jamaica.
Best decision ever.
Feel the sand between your toes and the gentle waves of the sea on your skin. Feel the warm Jamaican breeze lift your spirits and nourish your soul. Escape to exactly what makes your heart beat. You will love every moment. Jamaica, heartbeat of the world. Let's go.
Thanks again to all the sponsors. Thank you, our viewers, for staying with us. The comments in the chat are not just fast and furious, but are other discussion topics and papers in themselves. So I hope that we're able to multi-talk and to make note of all of those that we will not be able to cover in this one conversation. In this segment of the conversation, however, I would like us to look at who is Boukman, and I still speak about him in the present. There is a way in which I believe for us to answer the question, why should we care? We need to also have an understanding of what we lost or of what was stolen and how we might be able to recover that. Dr. Cécile, who is Dutty Boukman?
Thank you for that. So for me, Boukman is at the heart of Black liberation. Boukman is a visionary. He was a Ougan or Voodoo priest, and his vision was really to ensure that everybody see themselves as holistic human beings. When you are in a situation as an enslaved person and you have a master who's constantly telling you you are nobody, it is important to remember that you are not a nobody, you are somebody. And I think Boukman did that. We can see Boukman as a counselor and a spiritual advisor, as a leader, and as somebody who wanted to change, not just challenge, but also change the status quo. This is why, if we can analyze, for just bear with me, I'm a literary scholar for 2 minutes, just analyzing the prayer I read at the beginning, there are so many elements dealing with nature, you know? So Boukman, as I think about Boukman, we could be thinking about religion from so many perspectives. We can be thinking about Eastern religion. We think, of course, about Voodoo being so central, because what many people do not understand, Voodoo is a religion of connection. It's a connection to the earth. Each human being is connected. So he's invoking the earth, the sun, light, the ocean. It's about survival. It's about climate change without using those words. If we don't respect the earth, if we don't respect the ocean, who provides food for the fishermen, and we know right now with sea level rising, we're not able to, the fishermen and women are not able to go and fish. They're not able to find enough fish. So Boukman is invoking having that connection, having that respect for nature. And also what Boukman is saying, that this God, the white God, cannot be good, because this is a God that's telling us we are nothing. This is a God that equates suffering. So therefore, we have to reach to our own God, our own African God. And in Haitian Creole, we have an expression to refer to Nanguinè. I'm writing it on the chat. In Guinea, it's this imaginary land in Africa. It's not necessarily a specific place, a specific country. It's not necessarily the country of Guinea today, but it is this notion of returning to the ancestors. And this is what gives people strength. It is also connected to marronage, as we know from the Caribbean, whether we're thinking about Nenny de Maroon, or in Guadeloupe, the Mulâtresse Solitude. Boukman is all these forces and more. And as someone who works on gender, in my background, I have Cécile Fatiman, because oftentimes we forget the people who has influenced Boukman as well. And so, and again, I'll stop here because I can, I can go on 5 minutes.
If in fact Boukman was the first concrete expression of Black Lives Matter, then Eddy Boukman was the first Pan-African Congress. So talk to us about what happened in Boukman, what is Boukman, and what is Boukman's connection to that?
Okay, that's a great question. I really like, Amina, the way that you use a political congress. And I think to complement what Cécile said, if I could add something to what Cécile already said, it's like Boukman can be seen as a freedom fighter. Boukman was a freedom fighter, but not only a freedom fighter, but someone who was able to put or allow women to have, to occupy, you know, a leadership political position. Because as Cécile said, Boukman, there is no Boukman without Cécile Fatima. But now, about Boukman, this is a complex issue, and Cécile already assumed that Boukman was a Voodoo priest. And I would just nuance that, because I'm not saying he wasn't, but I just to add you, give you a more broader picture. Oftentimes when people are thinking, and I'm seeing that we have Dr. Cécile Joseph, who is also like me, a scholar on religion. Oftentimes I wouldn't you guys to fail in that. It's like in reduction. Oftentimes when we think Africa as a place, as a continent with a homogeneous religious culture. It was not true. Africa, actually, as a scholar on religion, Africa is one of the very birthplace of what we call in sociology of religion, religious diversity and religious pluralisms. So for me, it is not that important to know if Boukman, as some folk are saying, that he was a Voodoo priest, or if he was an imam of Muslim, because it's important also to say that the enslaved or captive that arrived in the so-called new continent in America, they were from all different backgrounds. Because I recall I was teaching sociology of religion, and the Muslim word for Islam is salama. Salama means peace. So Boukman, no matter he was an imam from Islam or a Voodoo priest, he was someone who was a freedom fighter, someone who used his spirituality to fight for the liberation of the oppressed. And after just doing that precision, now I would like to say that Boukman, he was one of the great leaders who opened, you know, the way, and that would make possible the Haitian Revolution. The Haitian Revolution, because Boukman is the embodiment. He was and he is, because in sociology, in phenomenology, we said the life, the day-to-day life, the everyday life is made by the word of the ancestor. This ancestor is still, his spirit is still with us today. Boukman was and Boukman is the embodiment of struggle, the embodiment to fight for what Bob Marley will say, stand up, get up, stand up for your right, stand up, get up, don't give up the fight. So Boukman is the embodiment of that spirit, no matter what religion he belongs, but that spirituality to fight for your right, to fight for a decent life, to fight for a dignified life. And without Boukman, without Cécile Fatima, we wouldn't have the Battle of Vertier, we wouldn't have the different battles that have led in November 18 to the Haitian Revolution, and on January 1st, 1804, to the proclamation of that revolution. This is the way that I see Boukman. This is the way that I interpret Boukman. This is the way that I appropriate Boukman myself.
Thank you very much for that fulsome, almost, because there is so much more we can learn about and talk about Boukman and the impact of his heritage and culture from Senegambia and what he would have carried with him. And I'm throwing that out so that all of us can continue the conversations in our own individual spaces. No matter what Boukman was or represented, however, that conference in Boukman spoke to strategy and organization to get to where we want to get to. So I wouldn't like us to leave this discussion today, John Eddy, without talking about what happened on August 14 at Boukman 230 years ago.
Yeah, as I said at the beginning of my remark, that today marks the 230th commemoration. We are commemorating because this is an exercise of politics of memory, or I said, of the anniversary of the revolt of enslaved Africans brought as captive in America. And Boukman, in that specific date, in that specific, I would say, a political conference, you use a specific words, that also that has a lot of different kind of spirituality, because a nation is a soul. A nation, we said in French, une nation a une âme. In Creole, we say, une nation gagne une âme. So Boukman has a âme. We don't know that âme for me. That's why, for instance, in Boukman experience, when Law, Order will found in Boukman experience in Delma 65, one of the very first album was Dangerous Crossword, Carrefour Dangereux. For me, Boukman was that political symposium with a crossword of spirituality. But all those spirituality converge with the same goal, the liberation.
Would you speak to the strategy that it didn't happen by happenstance, that he deliberately went from plantation to plantation in a long period of education and selected 2 or 3 delegates from each plantation who would then come to this place to develop the strategy that would be implemented towards.
And also, if I may, we have to remember that we had people like Jean-François, Biassou, Jeannot, who were leaders in the Haitian Revolution, who was there. And there was an oath-taking before which Boukman say, that speech the prayer that I read earlier. And that is important. This was, to say, we are coming together. An animal was sacrificed. And this was one of a series of meetings. And the goal was to organize the slave revolt. And, meeting was important. And this was, keep in mind, we in a situation of the colonizers, they did not want people to meet because they did not want, and we had enslaved people from different regions. So the very fact of coming together, bringing people from different, from different regions to say, we having that as our commonality. It's similar to today. We have different people from different Blacks, from different countries. But the reality is we have to take, when the police stop me, unless there's someone who's used to accent, they're not gonna care I'm from Haiti, somebody else is from Jamaica, somebody's from Ghana. We just all Black, we just Black bodies. So similarly to that, I think when Boukman brought people from different plantations, it was to say, we need to come together. And that's Boukman was to cement, to have us come together as this is our goal. We have a common goal.
I think it is important. We can't overstate the value of planning. We can't overstate the value of strategizing. We can't overstate the value of coming together. I would like us to discuss that in the final segment, which we're going to be calling Who is to Pay for the Pain in Paradise, which is a line I'm stealing from a poem written by my son, Neto Maceo Meeks. Let's take a break to acknowledge and thank the sponsors once again, and we will come back to look at who is to pay for the pain in paradise.
Me gusta. Me gusta.
Cuando amanece, cuánto me gustas.
Tus playas, tu mar, tu cielo, me gustan.
Tu sonrisa al verme, cuando me abrazan tus olas y despiertan tus aromas.
Me gusta. Me gusta.
Tus paseos,
Me gusta.
descubrirte,
Me gusta.
tus secretos, todo en ti me gusta.
Dominicana, me gusta como eres, me gusta tu belleza, todo lo que tienes. Dominicana, me gusta como eres y toda su belleza, te abre los brazos, te quiere.
Dominican Republic has it all.
Thanks everybody for staying with us for this very enriching, spiritually enlightening and empowering conversation. Please continue to post your comments in the chat. And if there is anybody who wants to speak, I'm picking on our technical people now to see how that could be facilitated. I know we have writers and poets and singers in the audience. Yes, and we want to definitely acknowledge Boukman Experience, who through their music and through the name of the group allowed the rest of the world to begin to ask, well, who is Boukman? And to say, of course, that we feel the pain of those members who have transitioned to be with the ancestors. So who is to pay for the pain in paradise? Dr. Cécile, I want to begin with something you said earlier. Which are the stories we do not hear? And we do not hear the stories of what the Haitians are doing for themselves. And I don't want to use that word resilient. Sometimes it's a bad word. It means I will get up as often as you thump me down. And quite frankly, sometimes I am tired. I'm sick and tired of being resilient. But who is to pay? What are some of the stories we're not hearing of what the Haitians are doing for themselves? And then we can take the other elements, the external elements of who is to pay. Can I just say that people are being asked to raise their hands if they're interested in speaking? And then Aziko, after Dr. Cécile, then we will acknowledge you to speak immediately after that. Yes, Dr. Cécile.
Yes, thank you for that question. Who is to pay? I think, again, we have to change the narratives. I think of a book that one of our colleagues, Gina Tenayulis, wrote post-earthquake that say Haiti needs new narratives. So until we really conscious of how we, wherever we are, whether we are poets, whether we are journalists, of changing the narratives, the people in Haiti, they are constantly paying. Until we also mindful if we are giving, to which organization we are giving. What are their values? I always warn students, you can do more harm than good when you are giving. Until we really intentional about which stories about Haiti do we read, which stories do we tell? Do we go out to non-mainstream media? do we think about how after the earthquake, and I'm sure to different levels, this will happen again today, how it was Haitians who were helping Haitians. And even when you take up the stories between Haiti and the Dominican Republic, we don't hear all the complexity of that history. So I think we need to start there. We need to constantly be challenging whose stories are we telling? Because the problem is the media.
Storytellers, Dr. Cécile, who are
Yes.
the storytellers? I recognize Aziko. Aziko, are you there? And then after Aziko, Lisa, I recognize you. It's good to see you again. I think the last time I saw
Thank
you was back for World Book and Copyright Day.
Yeah.
The narrative. Oh, Aziko, we lost Aziko. We will come back to get Aziko. Lisa, would you make your intervention now, please?
I didn't know about Dutty Boukman. Thank you for, introducing him into my discovery. I looked him up and I saw 2 pictures, and I'm just deathly curious as to whether any of those 2 pictures were accurate. I posted both in the chat. I can repost it again to see if someone can confirm if that's who he actually was and what he looked like. I just did again.
Okay, so that's the question that you're asking.
Yeah.
I'm going to give the panelists an opportunity to respond to that. Just to say that in my own craw, as we say in Jamaica, is a dispute that refuses to die, although we think we have settled it, about Paul Bogle, because there is an American called Jennings who is very often paraded as Paul Bogle, or Paul Bogle is paraded as him, and they say we don't know who we're talking about. So,
Right.
so when the panelists respond, it's not just which image of Bookman should we accept as authentic, but also, if you will please, what does it matter?
Again. Go ahead.
You want me to start, Cécile?
No, I mean, again, it's back to, who is telling the story. Until the lion tell its tale of the stories, as we know, it's always going to benefit the hunter. So we have to question representation. But ultimately, as Dr. Amina say, does it even matter? In fact, even now, even though there are archives, there are so many people vote about this, you have others who question whether Boakaima even took place. And I think it's a way to further discredit, this genesis of something we have like that's so important for Haitian identity. But I think it's also, we cannot talk about these issues without talking about the idea of power, without religious power. Every year, I'm sure this is happening somewhere in Haiti, you have a group of born again, come to Jesus Christian who say the country is having all these issues because we make the pact with the devil and all that nonsense. Forget about the fact that people are cutting trees because the government, we're not giving them alternative to cook. Forget all that, but it's the pact that we made, with the so-called pact with the devil. So I think there's, it's like there are a lot of people consciously wanting to take that away from us, to say that anything dealing with Boakaima is bad. And so we have to bring religion into that representation. But ultimately, I don't think it matters what Bookman.
That's such an important part of the narrative which needs to be changed or needs to be told and needs to be understood that we brought our own spirituality with us. I'm not going to try to do that now because that is perhaps the fifth follow-up discussion that we have identified so far since we have been talking. Just to note that, yes, there is that narrative in the wider Caribbean, in the diaspora, that, oh, if Haiti would only come to the Christian God, and of course, they found us with our Bibles in Accilien. So there is an interpretation of the white man's God. If we would only come to this, then we wouldn't have storms, and we wouldn't have floods, and we wouldn't have Haitians dying at sea. That's part of the demonization of the Haitian people. And yes, we should discuss that. For now, we will note it as an aspect of what's going on. I want to ask Jean Eddy to come in now on another aspect of changing the narrative. So often we hear, what can we give to Haiti? What can we do for Haiti? And Dr. Cécile has said to us, we need to understand what Haitians are doing for themselves. Perhaps part of changing that narrative is, what has Haiti offered the region in terms of where we are now? And what does Haiti still have to offer? Dr. Jean Eddy, what has Haiti offered to us? What has Haiti facilitated for who we are? And what does Haiti have to offer still?
Okay, great question. And I do my best to answer it. First, I think with Haiti, with that connection between Boukman from Jamaica and someone who will be very instrumental in the process of liberation of Haitian people, you can see that Haiti wasn't born in, autarcie, we say in French. So Haiti is symbolized, that global solidarity, because that connection between the Caribbean and some Caribbean folk, to migrate, it was not because of his will, but he in Saint-Domingue, Haiti, will create that, help to shape that political consciousness. That is like that give and take between Jamaica give Haiti, Africa give to Jamaica. So that connection between the global Caribbean and Haiti. But in return, in November 1804, from November 1803 to January 1804, Haiti, as Blair Nice would say, the Africa oldest daughter, Haiti will give to not only the region beyond Latin America and the Caribbean, Haiti will restore the dignity of every single Black person in the region. Haiti, what it gives us in terms of philosophy, we call moon in Haitian, in philosophy, le moon. A man, you moon, tout moun say moon. Every person is a human being. Haiti gave that to you guys. Haiti give that to every Black person. Every man is a man. I recall reading James Baldwin. And James Baldwin, I am a man. That philosophy of I am a man, Haiti ontologically, epistemologically, restore our dignity. Haiti give, this is the best contribution that Haiti can give us. Haiti restore us in our dignity, in our humanity, right? This is one of the greatest contributions of Haiti. But it's not only that. Haiti offered us that what George Hegel will call the spirit, l'esprit, the spirit of revolution, the spirit of fighting. In Jamaica, in Trinidad and Tobago, for instance, Eric Williams, in the Patriarch of Trinidad and Tobago, all of them read the Haitian Revolution and was empowered by the Haitian Revolution. that spirit of revolution. Without Haitian revolution, it won't be, we won't have the Cuban Revolution. Without that Haitian revolution, you know, in Grenada, we won't have the new Jewel movement. We wouldn't have any son, white men. We wouldn't have, Maurice Bishop. So that spirit of dignity, fight for your dignity, Haiti give us Rastafari, because without Haiti also, that ideology of Bob Marley, stand up for your right, that ideology of Marcus Garvey, let's go back to Africa, that dignity, that proud to be African, to be Black. Haiti give us that, and this is priceless.
It is priceless. Thank you very much for that. I'm acknowledging Ann Worm saying thank you, Haiti. I'm acknowledging Andrine Bonner saying God bless Haiti, for our somebodyness is honored, and all of you have to figure out that beautiful Jamaican word, the spirit, the identity, the historical linkages that we have been able to carry into 2021, and how that powers and empowers what we go after. And also, I think everyone who has visited Haiti in recent times, in contemporary times, I am certainly blown away by the way anybody in the street, and I don't like the word ordinary, but the ordinary man in the street can tell you about Haitian history. I'm blown away by the fact that you walk through the streets of Haiti, hear me now, like it's a small place, a big place in the towns, and we do not see this undressing that the rest of us copy from the United States. Yes, we see people who perhaps don't have money, but they are neat and neatly put together, and in their deportment, they're saying to you, I am somebody, and who I am, and my identity matters. That spirit, if we could all stand up with that spirit of not wanting to be more of others and less of self, but to affirm who we are. So thank you everyone for your comments. We salute and honor Haiti. Steve, I don't know if you planned it, but I'd like to take another acknowledgement of the sponsors. And when I come back, I'd like the panelists to have a futuristic view. So often we think that we're the passive recipients of history. When we come back, I'd like you to say how you envision the future.
Jamaica.
Best decision ever.
Feel the sand between your toes and the gentle waves of the sea on your skin. Feel the warm Jamaican breeze lift your spirits and nourish your soul. Escape to exactly what makes your heart beat. You will love every moment. Jamaica, heartbeat of the world. Let's go.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody. We have another 7 minutes or so left to close this part of the conversation. And I would like us to look at the future. How would we like to see the future of Haiti? And how can we assist in engineering that? Not just as passive recipients of history, but as active contributors to civilization. And I know that one of the questions on people's minds, and one of the questions that was posted in the chat earlier is, what is the role of CariCom? I don't know who wants to go first, Dr. Cécile or Dr. Eddy?
I'll help. I'll let Dr. Eddy, because he does this work and he has lived and studied in Mexico, and I think he will be better suited to answer the CariCom question.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Cécile. I will try to do my best. Effectively, I got a master's degree in Latin American studies, and I was a professor of political history of Latin America and the Caribbean political system also. So the CariCom, we have to understand, and after I would like also to answer your question on warm, how can we help Haiti now? I will try to connect both. So the CariCom, we have to understand that it's like a kind of association that responded to a specific political moment. It was a time that we cannot have globalization, without cooperation. We couldn't have globalization without integration. So it was a period in global time, so many, type of integration. And CariCom was built upon that rationale, though a better political and economic integration of, many sisters countries in the region. That idea was great. But in political science, there is an idea that says every organization would have a certain tendency to transform itself into an oligarchy, and it was Robert Michel, an Italian political scientist, who said that. And when we see how CariCom operates in Haiti, oftentimes CariCom sideline with a specific political group, and a specific political group that that not necessarily is defending or promoting the interests of the Haitian population. So CariCom hasn't have a one unidimensional policies in Haiti. Sometimes he sideline with the government, and sometimes legitimize, for instance, some atrocity of the government. For instance, I recall in 2003, I was doing starting my PhD, but the administration of Jean-Bertrand Aristide was not doing great in Haiti. So I am not justifying, the kidnapping of Aristide in 2004, but CariCom also, he was like an ally of Jean-Bertrand Aristide, and that back at that time, Jean-Bertrand Aristide legitimized the shimmer in the public arena. It's like sometimes CariCom folk, they are more diplomat, and they are seeing Haiti as a way to make business for their own privilege. I think we need a better approach, a different kind of narrative, a different kind of intervention, and better understanding among many countries, sister countries in the Caribbean. The idea of CariCom is good, but CariCom action and practice are not necessarily inscribed into the promotion of the dignified life of Haitian people. CariCom too often has been co-opted by those political elites in Haiti, right? This is something important. Another thing to connect to your question, Anna, and how to help Haiti now. I think that what we are doing, what CariCon, what Dr. Amina is doing, what I'm doing with Cécile and all you guys, we are helping Haiti because we are helping to deconstruct the hegemonic narrative on Haiti. Cécile Accilien mentioned Professor Gina Tena-Ilu's book, Why Haiti Needs a New Narrative. So I said recently to an interview with PBS that we need a different intellectual narrative on Haiti, because also we have in Haiti many intellectuals, they have also the responsibility in what has been happening. It's like kind of recent that you have, for instance, when something happening on Haiti, you have person like me or Cécile on TV to speak about Haiti. Usually you didn't have our face. Other people spoke for Haiti on behalf of the Haitian people. It is now that we own our own narrative. And as I said in many occasions, Haitian studies is a field. The field is welcome because Haiti has been always a welcoming place. We welcome every scholar. Haiti goes beyond color, skin color. So you can defend Haiti if you are white, but what are you doing? What is your ideology, right? So Haitian people need to own their own narrative, and we need allies too. Those allies also, they need also to help us to spread those non-neo-colonial narrative discourse on Haiti. The media has to do a better job. The media has to do a better job. So for instance, now you see recently I was on PBS, Cécile, you have Dr. Alisa, you have Professor Cécile Joseph. So now you have intellectual who are speaking truth to power. Too often, our intellectuals, they were allies of the status quo just to promote their career. So we need intellectual, we need a new class, not only a new class of politicians, not only a new class of economic elite, but we need a new class of intellectual who have that commitment to use knowledge as a tool to empower, as a tool that seeks the liberation of the oppressed, not as a tool to reinforce the status quo. Because too often, many intellectuals, they have played the game of the system. We need a shift of those intellectual discourse, a shift intellectual committed to social justice, committed to racial justice from a decolonial perspective. But we are helping Haiti with those narratives. We are helping Haiti by telling truth to power, by rewriting history, by challenging the falsification of history. We are doing a great job to help Haiti, because helping Haiti is first and foremost helping to restore the international image of Haiti. And what CariCon is doing is inscribed into that process of restoration of that international image of Haiti.
Thank you very much. Speak up, talk up. That's what we take away. That thought is the first action and speaking is the second action, and both actions are critical, but also that we speak with one voice. We know what is the ideological position and the strategies that we are carrying forward. I'm going to give you the last word, Cécile, but before that, can I recognize Sam? Sam, would you come in, please?
Hi, greetings all. I kind of had a twofold question. You touched on it a bit, Mr. St. Paul. My question is, I live in a place that is Anglophone Caribbean, but I'm of Francophone Caribbean descent. So what I have noticed, even here, trying to advocate on behalf of the Franco-speaking Caribbean, I think one of the major things I've noticed is there is I want to say like a barrier of sorts when it comes to language, because what I have observed specifically where I am currently located, which is the USVI, is that the Francophone Caribbean tends to be almost sectioned off like a whole different nation from the rest of the Anglophone Caribbean. And I think that's why a lot of our stories are lost in translation, because at least in the northern part of the Caribbean, there's a greater emphasis on the learning of Spanish as a second language, because it's seen as more commonly used in the area, I guess. And so the Francophone languages kind of fall to the wayside, even in translations during times of emergency, medical stuff, things like that. But the second question I kind of had, well, first one would be, what can we do to kind of break that? Would you suggest teaching the Creoles or making French as mandatory as Spanish learning? That would be my first question. And the second one is touching on your CariCom points. If you've studied US history with the Caribbean, kind of when it became the ward of states for all the other metropole colonizers, and it decided to be the overseer of the region on their behalf, what has tended to happen is any political figure, any local hero that was not in alignment with the US maintaining the grip and the hold of basically becoming ruler of the world was then coined as a communist and villainized, like we saw with Bishop and every other person, even George Odlum out of St. Lucia. then what they do is they behind the scenes put somebody in place that will soutier them in their vis. And I know those who understand the French Creole, I guess soutier would be to enable. I think that's the quickest way to put it. Sorry, my brain doesn't think in English at all times. But what do we do as a people, understanding this being our history, unspoken most times? What do we do as a people to not allow that narrative of the US being, oh, that's a commie or that's a socialist, to then make our own people become fearful of the very people trying to save us from colonialism?
Conversation number 6 that we need to have. Dr. Cécile, I'm going to ask you to take that one, please.
Yeah.
And when you have completed that, if you would just give us your future vision of Haiti and what needs to be done.
Thank you for that, Dr. Amina. So thank you, Sam. These are very important questions. So I think there are a lot of real and there are also artificial borders. Like one of the challenges in Haiti and the DR, for instance, many of the borders are artificial. The linguistic border is very real. And this is one of the ways we keep to ourselves. And before I give a little bit of insights to your question, Sam, even if we take something as basic as how hard it is to travel from Martinique to Barbados, for instance. So even that in and of itself is an imperialist, colonialist, capitalist issue that prevents us from having connection to the island. I believe language is powerful and very important. And personally, I think I'm an idealist, but I also think it's important to pay attention to our native languages and not just French. So I will encourage teaching Creole. And I know that causes other issues because I know there are different types of Creole, but I was very bothered, for instance, the Caribbean Studies Association, they had a call out because they want to, for their journal. And they had so many languages, including Papimiento, but they did not have Haitian Creole. One of my students wrote about that and pushed back. Their response was, oh, they didn't really have people who could review articles on Creole. So this is a long-winded way of saying, I think part of it is to go back to what Jean-Eddy said, we have to be intentional. We have to think about what is our goal? Is our goal to preserve the legacy? Is our goal to come together as different island nation and to strengthen our ties? Or is our goal, as we know, many of these islands, there's a lot of tension, being in Martinique, for work-related things. Many Martinican treat St. Lucian like their second-class citizen. And we all know Haiti is at the very bottom. We know how Haitians are treated in the Bahamas. So I think we need to find ways to have more connection with these type of programs to really start seeing what we can learn from each other, what brings us together, some cultural commonalities, and to teach, to teach our different languages to one another. I think that's important. And for me, as I was thinking, I'm circling back, going to Dr. Amina's original question, I think with technology, we have so many opportunities to really come together. Visual is powerful. I think of my former university in Lawrence, Kansas, so really in the Midwest, very white America. So yet we had an opportunity to have program to their common book, and I was able to have an art exhibit. They have a collection on Haitian art, and to show what are some of the ways, the connection between Haiti and the US, because it's oftentimes every country, it's what's in it for me. So we talk visually about the Louisiana Purchase, how that shaped the US. we talked about what it meant for President Alexandre Pétion to help Bolivar, you know, the connection to the larger Latin American countries. So for me, I will leave, my last thought is like, we have to remain hopeful as a parent, as a teacher, as a scholar. We have to have hope in education and hope in culture. If I bring 5 or 10 different island nations together and we have our rice and our plantains, we can start a conversation. This is culture right there. If we have we have music, we have soca, we bring reggae, we bring compa, we bring salsa together, we can have a conversation. So I think culture and education, that's our hope.
Thank you very much. Yes, and when I say one voice, I don't at all mean one language. I mean one intention. Imperialistic hegemony does not depend on the language that you speak or whether there is a common language. It's the intention to take your resources and take your soul. And therefore, part of what we have to ask ourselves in going forward is, what is our intention? And very often we find our intention will find a way around the languages. And I don't even want to say language barriers. So if there is one thing I think that Boukman wants us to take away from this initial conversation with this group is that we must remember how to be brave.
Yes.
We must remember how to be brave. And in remembering how to be brave, we have to remember who we are. The politics of memory, Jean Eddy, is very important. In remembering how to be brave, we have to change the narrative. And part of changing the narrative is that we disrupt the narrative that paints Haiti as a nation with its hands out, and that we remember and give thanks for what Haiti has given to us, what Haiti has made possible in terms of freedom and dignity in the region and wherever we find ourselves as a diaspora. Can we therefore give thanks to the ancestors for bringing us together on this very important 230th anniversary of Boukman? Can we give thanks to the ancestors and to all those people who said, but I never knew about Boukman? Because part of being brave is to excavate those of us who remain unknown or unremembered. Can we give thanks to the ancestors for planting these ideas in our heads and for telling us that this is just the beginning? Until we meet again, Dr. Cécile, Dr. Jean Eddy, friends all, writers, poets, listeners, thank you so very much.
Thank you. And I just want to add as conclusion to say it's not just like something that just happened. If we are connected, it's from some reason to some degree, it's because we are as the representation, the embodiment of the spirit of our ancestor. And everything starts at the cognitive level. So if you have a strong mindset, there is nothing that you couldn't achieve. So let's, as sister, as daughter of, as son of those ancestors, to continue to have that strong mindset and call for unity, because the philosophy of conquer to divide is that philosophy that the master of the systems are still using to conquer us. Let's unify, and unity and strong mindset we should overcome.
Ashe.
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 Maybe what we want to do as we go out, Dr. Cécile, is to close the circle. Can we just close off again with the Boukman prayer?
Sure. Thank you. The God who created the earth, who created the sun that gives us light, the God who holds up the ocean, who makes the thunder roll, our God who has ears to hear, you who are hidden in the clouds, who watch us from where you are. You see all that the white has made us suffer. The white man's God asked him to commit crimes, but the God within us wants to do good. Our God, who is so good, so just, he orders us to revenge our wrongs. It's he who will direct our arms and brings us the victory. It's he who will assist us. We all should throw away the image of the white man's God who is so pitiless. Listen to the voice for liberty that speaks in all our hearts. Ashe.
Ashe, Ashe, Ashe.